and you're going to talk about who's getting what, and it becomes a matter of contract. So you have to get an application license to marry. So this is what we're operating in over here. We have a three-party marriage.
You don't have a marriage contract with the one you think you love. You have a contract with somebody else who becomes a third party to your life, always.
We have a three-party marriage. Instead of just you and, your wife, I guess it could be a four-party marriage if you're still incorporating the spiritual dynamic of your creator force. But now you have your wife and your husband and the state. And if it's an application for a benefit or permission, that permission can be revoked or denied. And then you get into this, the construct of jurisdiction. The state, if they gave you anything, they can come in and take it away or tell you what to do and how to do it.
If the state comes in and says, you're not treating your children right and we want to take them, right, the first thing you have to say is, state, do I have a contract that says I gave my children to you? Understand that if you belong to the corporate board state, you can't make these arguments because you do have a contract, which is the birth certificate, which is the marriage license.
They can come in and take it away or tell you what to do and how to do it. And then you basically have to live and operate under the codes that are prescribed that dominate the application for the birth certificate, etc. So,
which your marriage license is your contract, is the woman's contract with the state and the man's contract with the state. It's not a contract between the man and the woman. Never was, never will be.
License is certificate or the document itself which gives permission, authority, or liberty given to or forbear in any act. So what we're talking about here is, anyone heard of just getting up on their own free will and accord and going somewhere because they just cared to do it? Or maybe it's a necessity, you need to go somewhere to get food and survive. You have an inherent system of rights that are bestowed upon you by the Creator, that are predicated on natural law principles. What goes up must come down, etc.
The first one is God's law, like the Ten Commandments, all of the laws of nature, like gravity.
But again, the world of admiralty, or the guys that are considered, are interested particularly in one thing, how to extract the wealth and power from the energy sources, which are the batteries that are you.
Via the Emancipation Proclamation, and I challenge you to go look in a law dictionary and look up the definition of emancipation and proclamation, and you will see that a proclamation is not a law.
Even though the very first marriage license wasn't even issued until 1863.
A proclamation is a public announcement by elected officials. It is not a law. So the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863 did not set any slaves free.
Even though the very first marriage license wasn't even issued until 1863.
Other information couldn't be expended to you because actually the Emancipation Proclamation dealt with corporations, or the transfer of the slaves from the corporate families to the corporate state. It didn't free you. Don't misunderstand that. It means a transfer. And so our people think that the Emancipation Proclamation was a document of freedom. There was a document of transfer of responsibility for the cares of the property. No different than if we all get together, you know, because we got the burden of doing business as individual units, and we decide to incorporate, and then we have a corporation that takes care of those affairs. Well, that's what the corporate states have done for the plantations. Are we clear on that?
You're going to be, you're going to prison or jail, or you'll be placed in a cell.
And you're looked at as energy objects, no different than they look at a battery. And so everything that they measure us by is by energy output.
Okay? A cell. A cell.
Get up, stand up. Stand up for your right. Get up, stand up. Don't give up the fight. Most people think the great God will come from the sky, take away everything and make everybody feel high. But if you know what life is worth, you will look for yours on earth.
other places. They can deal with you economically, but they generally don't live in the same communities with you, and they won't talk to you on international law principles, or they'll be deported. Because they all know that you're Moors, and they all know that you're home. And they all know that that Constitution that runs this government came from you. But they also know that you think it came from the European. And they also know that you think that Jesus was a European. And they also think that you think that that Constitution regulates him and you're outside of it. And that you're waiting for a program for somebody to give you some rights temporarily. You understand? So people have the wrong concept of Allah, of Yahshua, the prophets, Jesus, all of their concepts are totally wrong.
It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth. What truth? That you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind.
I say it again, you've been had. You've been took. You've been hoodwinked, bamboozled, led astray, run amok. This is what he does.
And you must understand that. And the reason I'm telling you these things, and the reason we're doing this particular lecture, is because if that's not addressed by the people on a serious matter, it will be used, as it has been used, to profile you, to extract revenues from you as chattel property. And most people are under the impression that slavery in the Union State Society had ended. Well, the driver's license is one of the major instruments that is used politically to sustain slavery.
We need to understand that we really don't know that we don't know. Most Americans have been brainwashed to believe that they are free. You know, all of that home of the brave propaganda. If you think you're already free, you wouldn't make any effort to become free. But free from what?
And as I will share with you tonight, the majority of the people in the world, and I'm not going to get into all of the details about that, but the majority of the people in the world, 99% of them live in slavery today. So you have to make up your mind as to which world, which I you're going to be. Am I a slave or am I a sovereign? And the problem that so many people face who take their initiation to be sovereign is that it's so hard to be sovereign when all of your life you've been a slave. Emancipation Proclamation of 1863 did not set any slaves free. Because all of the people you will encounter, nearly all of them, will discourage you because they have a slave mentality, they think like slaves, and they challenge you to continue to think like a slave. As they reduced their people from their sovereign capacity and forced them to join nation states, then they were able to issue statutes, codes, ordinances, resolutions on them. And a statute is not a law. It is corporate policy. If the state comes in and says, you're not treating your children right and we want to take them, right? The first thing you have to say is, state, do I have a contract that says I gave my children to you? At what point produce the contract? Produce the contract. If you send me a bill, and understand that if you belong to the corporate board state, you can't make these arguments because you do have a contract, which is the birth certificate, which is the marriage license.
And so if the people are not aware of that, they don't suspect what that license is for. That license is a movement passport. So they can make sure that you couldn't buy your way out of slavery. And also they made sure that you would never handle money anymore. So up until about 1964, they had government agents out systematically giving people Federal Reserve notes, fiat currency, telling you to get your grandmom's gold watches and the gold coins, and they'll give you $1 for 2 silver quarters. and they'll give you $2 for a silver dollar and or $1 for a 50-cent piece, and everybody got all their silver out. That's because they was getting all the real money, because that's the only lawful money, out of your hands, because they had every intention to force everyone in the family to work to survive.
As far as I'm concerned, it's all one great big smoke-filled mirror of a belief system. You believe that there was a debt. You believe that this is money. You believe that this has actually got value to it.
So in order to bureaucratize slavery, they couldn't get rid of it, but they had to veil it.
It's a belief system. If we stop believing in this, what's left? I mean, if this really truly had value, here's a nice little test for you. If this really truly had value to it, could you go to the Federal Reserve and get bullion for it like we used to? If they don't give it to you, then this isn't worth what they said it was.
Hi, I'm Elliot Salter, and I've been a pawnbroker for over 40 years. I've been doing it since I'm 8 years old, and I love gold. Guy called me up and wanted to know if we made loans on gold bars, which we hear all the time. And I said, sure. So he brought it in, and it was a gold bar from the Spanish galleon Atocha. And the galleon sank in 1625. This bar was a real piece of history. He had all the documentation, and it had notches cut out of it. It had a serial number on it. It was here for a couple of years. He paid interest on it, and he finally picked it up. Another real interesting story. One day I was at the counter, and a customer comes in and asks one of the guys at the counter, can I borrow a pair of pliers? And the guy says, well, yeah, but you got to promise to bring them back, because people borrow tools and they don't return. He goes, well, no, I'm not going anywhere with them. So he gave him the pliers, and the guy pulled out a bad tooth. And here's the tooth right here.
So the deal was, with the fiat currency, you do the same work, but then they would call it Job. You know, like in the Bible, Job, take everything from you, make you curse your God. That's where job come from. Give you a job with the same expenses that they would have to deliver, say, to Smith, and would have to leave the corporation or the plantation. Both the same.
I was at Santa Monica Beach a few years ago walking in the sand, and I spotted something that glittered, and I looked down, and lo and behold, I found this gold bar. $10,000. Doesn't look like it, does it? And here it is in my little greedy hands. $10,000. All mine. It's wonderful, and it's all mine. I see gold every day. It comes and it goes.
Well, they needed to get the woman out the house, because the plan was to destroy the family. So the deal was, with the fiat currency, they could create, just like currency, just like you turn on electricity, turn down a volume, restrict the water, the flow of the water, and you don't see their face. All you see is each other's face, and you don't recognize it as a third-party action because you think you have money and didn't know that you had script.
We really don't know that we don't know.
Because Federal Reserve notes, they have no value whatsoever. They're backed entirely on the full faith and credit of the U.S. population.
See, it was in, like, say, up until the late 1800s, most of the people that were held to forced servitude, the different plantations or corporations had the logistical problem of, like, say, delivering to you certain amount of goods for certain services that your company might render our company, and of course our workers or our slaves or servants were beneficiaries, that because like cattle they had to be cared for, and they couldn't let you go because you might run away. That's another reason why the license was thrown up too, and that agreement with the several states.
You know, so without you backing these things up,